like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Because it's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows.
The answer to the question, why do we borrow in the currency we can print? It's to avoid inflation. That's why. Because if we just printed the money, we'd have inflation and prices would go up, and so that would be a bad thing. And so to avoid inflation, we borrow. So when the government borrows money, the money supply doesn't go up because it's borrowing the money that's already there. And so that does not create inflation. Now, if the government doesn't want to do that, if the government just prints money, then it has to increase the money supply. And then it spends that new money it printed into circulation and prices go up. But when he's talking about the bond market, the government is borrowing the money. The government is selling a bond. The person buying the bond is the one making the loan. Now, the question was, well, why do we do that? Because we're borrowing our own currency. We could just print it. Yes, we can just print it if we're willing to have inflation. The government runs deficits, and then it's the Fed that buys the bonds. So in that respect, we're not borrowing. When we're borrowing from the Fed, right, the government's borrowing from itself. And when we borrow from the Fed has to print money. And that's inflation. See, when the government borrows from the private sector or the government borrows from other governments, let's say the U.S. government sells bonds and the Chinese government buys the bonds. Well, that's not inflationary, at least not here. It might be inflationary in China because they may print yuan to buy the bonds, but it's not inflationary in America.